He knew that I was looking out for one of these, and he turned me onto it, and I think it was like a day later, it was on a pallet shipped to me.
And where are you moving? So David's moving to, where are you moving?
We were moving to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
So David's gonna kind of watch over this whole build, basically, so it's gonna be a good experience for him because then he'll know what's on his bike. We are gonna start with a Contessa Kit, really good kit.
Take a reliable, he's looking around, we have like 300 scooters.
I know, reliable. When you're in a scooter shop, they're all reliable.
Ooh, Paul, it's like a fine wine. Nice. Does it? Here, put it back down there. Look at this. Like, look at this stuff right here.
What does it taste like?
You want to taste it? Look at this. What is this? It's like, it looks like caramel.
Oh, yeah.
What? What? Speak you? Is that all you got? I'm gonna get back.
I bet it wheelies.
Yeah,
that's how it sits.
Yeah, from here to here, wheelies.
Yeah.
You don't need axles, you don't need spacers, you don't need anything. If you have a Dio or a Japanese Dio of any sort that's already disc and it has 10mm legs, forks, these will bolt right on. I don't know, somebody clearly thought they were doing some sweet homebrew racing with the Dremel. All right, David, you ready to be famous?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your bike, story behind it, what it is, if you're good?
So this is a 1994 Honda Dio Baja XR. I've wanted one ever since I saw Brandon's.
My wife.
His wife's.
Wife.
Excuse
Don't
me.
get it
Correction.
confused.
Correction.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I went on a road trip this summer. I picked up a couple bikes, met a couple new friends, and on my way back from that road trip, I was talking with a friend in Texas, Tony Santos. He knew that I was looking out for one of these, and he turned me onto it, and I think it was like a day later, it was on a pallet shipped to me. So smooth purchase. Tony set me up with the guy. The guy was really easy to work with. It took about an hour, and then I just had to wait for it to show up in Portland.
So the guy imported it from Japan, and was he in Texas? So the guy that is
Correct.
the same
Yeah.
guy Tony
Correct.
deals with?
Yeah. He shipped it here, and then now we're just ready to get it frickin' ripping and have fun.
So how would you say? How do you explain the acceleration of stuff the way it was when you got it?
Just very stock. I mean, I took it for a little rip, and I'm not used to stock anyways because every one of my bikes is built.
Yeah.
And my jog even is it's completely stock, but it seemed a little bit faster than this, but it was well tuned, and this one is not. So
you say 35 miles an hour, somewhere in there?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Definitely.
So David brought it in for just some CVT work. I think originally, right? It was just some basic tuning CVT work.
Correct.
And a pipe.
And just go through to make sure. I mean, this bike could have been sitting on a patio in Japan for years. So just the thorough check and make sure that everything was good with it. Stuff that I would miss. In
the process of doing the work, the back wheel was really bent. We showed him a picture, so we went ahead and did our CNC wheels. The Aero, we put an air exhaust on it, which sounds killer. It totally woke this bike up. Did a fresh rubber on the, do we do front? Oh yeah, back and front. Yeah. Fresh rubbers on the front and back. Did some CVT tuning. I think we did a variator. But super basic stuff, and then we went to put the bike together and get it running for him and realized that his factory airbox had a big rip in it, and obviously you can't ever tune a bike with a ripped factory box. It sounds like it was really, well, pretty much almost impossible to get a good, well, you have like 3 coming now,
It took a
right?
while, yeah, it took a little bit. So, as Brandon said, I have some coming now. One literally just showed up here to the shop.
Right now, 2 minutes
but we've
ago.
already decided to do a build on it. So we're gonna do a CP 21 carburetor, I believe. Which is my personal favorite on my pre-bugs, so I'm sure that it's going to translate well to Honda and to Dio. And then I believe we're doing a kit, 70cc, I think a Contessa.
Yep. And where are you moving? So David's moving to, where are you moving?
We're moving to Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
So David's gonna kind of watch over this whole build, basically, so it's gonna be a good experience for him, because then he'll know what's on his bike, how to work on it, and just how it all goes together. That way when he goes over there, he can work on it himself, of course. So what we're gonna do here, we are gonna start with a Contessa kit, really good kit, great for sport builds. This will have a ton of torque. They last forever. I mean, these kits really don't die. Same with the Velocity Cast is really good, but they're both going to be on the same level as far as longevity, performance goes. I think Paul grabbed a 19, but I think we're going to do a 21, like you said. We could do either or, honestly. This is going to be a little bit better on fuel, a little bit better throttle response, but if you think you want more top end, then we may do a 21. It's totally up to you. You don't have to decide now.
I'll
either.
think about
You
it,
don't have to decide.
when we get to that.
Yep. So we've got a got a temp gauge here. We've got a Trail Tech temp with an extension. We've got a set of 16 by 42 gears. And a throttle cable, BR8HS spark plug. With a kit, you always want to run a colder spark plug. You always run indicator, the best of the best. We've got his main jets here, and we'll give you guys an idea of kind of where we end up as well. And all of our temp gauges come with extensions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the seat bucket off first. You're going to take these 4 bolts off, and that'll allow us access to the motor. With this bike, it's easy. It's just to pull the whole motor out, honestly, versus trying to work on it up top there. We'll pull the whole motor out, pull the old stuff off, get a good clean on it, and then start installing the new stuff, and then we can kind of show you guys the process of that. This bike, you're going to take this bucket off here. You're going to take this battery section off here. This front section probably would be nice to come out to access the electrical portion of it. The rest of the panels can stay. Kind of like to leave the skirts if I can, just because they're pretty fragile, and these are actually in really good condition. But you're just going to pull your bolt out here for your motor mount, and then your brake line, your electrical connectors. And I'm probably not going to really document how to get the motor out, because most of you guys already know how to do that, and we've got a lot of videos on how to do that as well. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so we have the exhaust loosened up. Doesn't need to happen right now, but it's done. Took the carburetor off the bike, took the seat bucket out.
Did we hire a new young guy here or what? What's going on?
We're gonna try to find out what is the secret to looking young, David.
Lots of beer. IPAs most specifically.
God.
Lots of beer and
2 to 4
lots of track pants.
2 to 4 a day.
Track pants, yep.
Track pants, even got the scooter tear with the scooter injury.
I'm gonna go get
The one time I put my bike down.
So today we're doing something we've never done before. We're gonna give away 2 bikes. First bike is the pre-bug. Once we hit 40,000 subscribers, we're gonna give it away to one of you guys. Now bike number 2 is the Bug Eye. This bike has a bunch of aftermarket parts. How you win this bike is just as easy. You already shop at Scooterswapshop.com. So every dollar you spend on the store is 1 point entered in to win. What are you doing here, Brandon?
We are pulling an oil line off here currently, but we're going to do a big bore kit, gears, gasket, get this bike dialed and ripping. Should be what? You want to ride my bike?
I need jet mine still.
It runs terrible. You can try it, but it may foul a plug. I think that, yeah, that thing is, it
runs really bad. Take a reliable. He's looking around. We have like 300 scooters in that.
I
van.
know,
Ready to ride.
reliable. When you're in a scooter shop, they're all reliable.
So yeah, we're gonna keep this bike on stock pump for the oil injection. I forgot. I actually did the right thing. I even have my handy bolt here ready. So we're gonna keep it on stock injection. I would say, I mean, it's definitely risky, but my wife's Baja has been running like that for, gosh, 3 years, probably 2,000 miles. We do fair to fair. It's like a wide open throttle for hours at a time. It doesn't have any problems. So I just told David, just every once in a while, just add a little drop of oil in the tank and give her some sweet lube that she much desires. We've got our wiring disconnected here, fuel lines out, and so all I really got to do is disconnect the line for the pump, the vacuum line for the pump. These bikes, probably a good thing to note, I told David, your tank is in the floor, so you have like a Mikuni style pump here that pulls gas from your tank, this guy. So it pulls gas from the tank up to the carb. So you, AF-18s have a vacuum line down here, and I'm calling it vacuum, it's really not, it's like a pulse where it's positive pressure, negative pressure, positive pressure, negative, to work that diaphragm back and forth. So if you have a bike that has a tank in the floor and you want to run a carb on it, then you need to have that tank. You can't tap your intake manifold because your intake manifold just sees vacuum. Between your reeds and the carburetor, and you'll see it, but between your reeds and your carb, you just see vacuum. Between your reeds and the rest of the motor, you see that pulse. But when your carb's wide open and if you tap it by the reeds, you're not going to see much of that signal because that carb is wide open. You're not going to see much of either. So that's why the AF-18 is actually tapped down at the bottom so it gets a good signal. We may have to on this bike, I've run into it on a few times where we may have to put in a fuel pressure regulator because my Dio, same setup, same everything, bigger carburetor, it over floods the carb and floods it out because it pushes too much fuel into the carburetor, pushes past the float, floods out. I don't know if we're gonna, it's like a roll of the dice as to whether it'll flood out or not, and I don't know. I've had several Dios do it. Guys that do ruckuses that do the vacuum pumps too. A lot of times it'll flood out their carburetors. So, as I explained earlier, is a dual cable. You have one for your carb on this bike, and Dios are going to be like this, and Elites. And then the other part is right. That's for your carburetor, and this is why you always have to run an aftermarket cable because this does not thread onto a aftermarket carb. That's for your oil pump. So when you roll the throttle, it's going to work that pump. So it's going to open the pump up to give it more flow. So we're going to zip tie that pump wide open so it's open all the time. All this comes out. We're just going to pull the whole motor out and then it'll just be a little bit easier there.
Nice. And who are you, sir?
I am David Strom, two-stroke joke on Instagram. And this is my
One of your
first Honda
48 bikes?
two-stroke. Yeah. Oh, I don't have that many, but so I've been a pre-bug guy for the last like 4 years. I've had 4 of them. I've kept 2, and I've always wanted this bike, and so now I have one, and I'm ecstatic about it.
David really got himself kind of addicted to this hobby. What was it that originally got you on your first bike? Or got you into a first bike?
I saw Ruckus, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, you
and
had
I was
a
like,
Ruckus
what
for a
the-
long time, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's right.
But I think that's what got me. I mean, so I grew up and I had a couple friends that their mom on a taxis and bought them each a Honda Spree, and we rode those things all over the place. I didn't have my own bike, but those are kind of all of our bikes. I mean,
Communal bikes.
super fun. And then just kind of forgot about it. And I guess about 6 or 7 years ago, started getting the spark again or wanting to ride. And then I saw a Ruckus and I'm like, I gotta get a f***ing Ruckus. I think by that point I already had my little Suzuki Noped FA50. So then bought a Ruckus, bought a really nice one, put probably $3,000 into that bike, and then sold it for, half of what I put into it. I love my Ruckus, but riding with the guys, one thing I realized right off the bat is I don't like being in the back of the pack. I don't like people waiting for me. And I realized on this one specific ride that unless I put a two-stroke in my Ruckus, that it was not the bike for me. So to get into a pre-bug, which is what I wanted, I had to sell the Ruckus. I actually sold the Ruckus and bought 2 pre-bugs, I think. So, so now I've been two-stroke for like the last 4 years, and that's it. And now I'm excited to learn a little bit more about the Honda, because I've had an Elite or a Dio or.
It's hard. It's hard to go back to a 4-stroke. It's hard to go back to 4-stroke. Unless you just want like twist and go, just have. Unless you want a really, really reliable bike. That's
For a bigger one, no problem. Like, you know, if I end up getting an X Max, or if I end up buying your T Max, or whatever ends up happening.
I mean, AT Max.
I don't mind a 4-stroke at that capacity, a big bike, but I mean, for my small scooters, I will never buy another 4-stroke.
And so
I just won't enjoy it.
I already asked him all these things.
I know,
And we already went over all of it.
but I'm
He's
doing
an
it on
editor.
this instead of this.
Motor's out. So now we've got, this is our pump here. You guys can see it a little bit better. And David, you can check it out too, but this is how this pump works. And so your throttle is just gonna, as you squeeze your throttle, it's gonna squeeze it like this, adding more oil. But all we're gonna do here is just zip tie this or use metal safety wire right here to make that sure that's open. And then this is where, this is going to the carburetor up here. So that'll stay and it'll feed your carb. This is this is the supply line coming from the tank. It's the bigger one. And then the back side here is your vacuum, or your pulse, as I should say. That comes off the engine here as well. It's kind of tucked under there. There's like a little nipple that comes off the back of the motor. This would be where you would replace, you know, that like billet CNC oil plug we have? This bike, if you chose to do premix, that CNC plug would go in place of this because it has a port sticking out of it. If you had an AF16. AF16s do not have this port. AF18s do.
Okay.
Because 16s have the tank up here. They don't need it. They just need the vacuum for the petcock, right, to let fuel flow. Since these have to have that pulse back and forth, that's why it's tapped here at your case.
Got it.
But like I said, a lot of people will, on your intake manifold, they'll tap it here for that pulse, but all you see is vacuum in here because your reeds are a one-way valve. They only let air in, nothing out. So you're only going to see that air going in. So you're never going to see that positive pressure here. When the piston's coming down, when your piston's coming down in your bottom end, it's creating pressure in the whole bottom end between your reeds. It's building up pressure, and then it gets down below the ports, and that pressure goes up in the ports, up into your cylinder, in theory. So this is why you see that positive, negative, work that diaphragm back and forth. So now we'll just pop the shrouds off, pull the cylinder off, and then go from there.
There's stuff going on here. This is like,
Is that a metal gasket?
yeah, but it's like lead. This is like a lead gasket. Yeah, look at how it has that lip there. That was actually down in the cylinder there. And it's oval. Funny story, and you can see it's all jagged on the edge here. So check that out. This is, so somebody's done some janky stuff.
Whoo! I hope the rest of the engine isn't like that.
I once had a head gasket blow out, and I used tin foil from a piece of gum wrapper to stuff it in there because I was like in the middle of nowhere, and it worked for a little bit.
Makes sense.
I gotta keep that as a souvenir, man.
It feels like lead, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's
lead.
really weird.
It's heavy. Let me see that.
It's heavy. It
It
bends
doesn't
very
feel like
easily.
aluminum. Well, it's not even. It's not even like a circle.
Not
either.
even close.
And look at this, is oblong. I don't know what's going on here. There you go.
That makes me sad.
It's okay. Ooh, did this one get a? Did this one get a race port? Does this get a race port? So this is a gasket that's complete, and there's a partial incomplete gasket left there.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
somebody installed.
Gasket on gasket.
Yeah, somebody installed it, did the cylinder, and they didn't clean the base. And actually, this works out really good. But if you hold this in the light, look at how that's wet from one side to the other. Do you see that? That's an air leak right there. That's gas coming in and out. If you see moisture going from one side of the gas, if you see moisture at all in the gasket, right? Gas, it's a leak. Because if it's all sealed up, you're never gonna have gas here, right? So that had an air leak. I mean, it's obviously gonna make it run lean, but it's just funny pulling it apart, seeing that, you know, this is a big deal, but you pull it apart, seeing all these things, right? Cylinder's pretty much toast.
I would say so.
You see all that rust?
Oh yeah.
So it's been sitting for a while, probably with moisture on top of the piston, and then it just gets that rust in there, and then they start it, and it just is basically just scratching itself from top to bottom. You're probably on borrowed time, honestly. with this, or it just would have ran weak for a long time. This actually almost looks like a...
That looks, I mean, I have one that I pulled off a pre-bug that doesn't really even look that bad, and I thought it was bad.
The main problem with the Dio, your limit here, is this, because this here is the top of where your variator is, right? So you can't make this any bigger because that's the bottom side of where your variator is. And then the height, obviously you can't go any bigger. You can go a little bit bigger, right? You can hog this out, which we're not gonna do, but it makes this area weak here because your cylinder is going here, and obviously it's close to the cylinder, so you can't go more in this way. So this is the biggest downfall of the Dio. These guys are these giant CC bikes, and that's why a Dio, 125 or 130 CC Dio may make 16 to 20 horse, where a 70cc Piaggio or Minarelli can make 30 horse because the design, because the intake is essentially going right into the crankcase area, where this is going sideways and then up because your air is coming in and it has to go straight up. You know, it has to work your way around here. So it's a weird side deal. It works, but it's just not. It's not ideal. So yeah, so all this is going to go away, but that's the size of your stock intake, and we'll get it next to you. It's really small. But yeah, I don't see, your stock crank looks pretty good, your piston looks good. This is called your boost port here. A lot of guys will hog that out, make it bigger, but what we're doing, I don't see any reason for it. But you can see that it's been, you see these gaskets are new, right? But the guy didn't take the time to clean the old gaskets off.
Yeah.
So that will, that's going to cause a lot of air leaks with everything. But so go ahead and get your piston out and get this all cleaned up. All right, so this looks pretty good. But yeah, little tiny stuff like that, a little piece of green can cause a leak. But in general, if you look at most people that are building these bikes, they don't go through this process. They just pull it off and put it back on, right? Well, it takes, I mean, what'd that take me? 15 minutes probably to clean it. All that actually went really easy, but just a little bit of simple green once you get all peeled off, or brake cleaner is good. Sometimes if the gasket's being a pain, I hit it with brake cleaner, let it soak, hit it with brake cleaner again, and it kind of starts to break the gasket off. Some of them can be a real big pain. And the other thing you want to look out for too is that where your cases come together, that this is flat. What happens with a lot of guys too is these are sold as a set from Honda, and then they're machined, from my understanding, after they join them and they machine them. So if you crack a case, if you replace one side, oftentimes if it's from a different year, they can be a little different, right? So if your cylinder is sitting here and one side's taller, one side's lower, right? You're gonna have a gap there and you're gonna get air leaks. So
air leaks,
anytime, this looks really nice. Anytime people change cases out, oh, my case cracked, I see, I'm looking for one side. If you get it, you really have to double check that this is perfect. My Piaggio, my twin, had a little discrepancy here. It was probably maybe about half as thick as this razor blade difference. I could feel it with my finger, and it leaked water. It was a big leak. So it doesn't take much, but this looks really good. So yeah, your rod, your crank look really good. And what you're looking for here, Hondas, dude, they last forever, is this is normal. Have side-to-side play. It's the up and down is what you don't want. So I typically hold the motor straight and I just lift it up and down. If you can feel that like clunk, 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 clunk up and down. But if you hold this with one hand and just try to move it up and down, you feel there's like no play at all. Just yes, like rock, but there's nothing. So it's normal to have the side-to-side like this, right? Because it's a bearing, but there's no up and down play. So this, I mean, dude, this motor will probably run, it will probably outlive you. I mean, I don't know how long you're gonna live, but
I don't know, man. I'm pretty old.
Yeah. Your crank bearings, you've got a crank bearing in here on both sides. This is where the oil runs down and goes into your crank bearings. So that will lube, that'll lube your crank bearings. Obviously, it's just gonna be some getting in from the inside as well from other areas, but that's the theory behind these is that's where your oil goes. Okay. So, and all your fuel and oil is gonna come in here, right? As it comes in your motor, it's gonna sit down in here. And you know, we could hog these out and machine them, but it's one of those things where it's gonna make a big difference. That being said, I know guys who have this same setup with Corsas, with built bikes, they're doing 75 miles an hour. So it's like, if you're gonna split your cases, put a crank in it, I would definitely clean this out and enlarge this boost port. But for what you're doing, it's totally pointless. Yeah, no, it'll be 100% fine.
And if I do, I would have you guys do that, like,
yeah,
or have Joe or someone do it. I'm not doing any of my own.
And it's one of those things. It's like the icing on the cake if you have the motor all taken apart, but it's definitely not something I would suggest, hey, go in here and do this. And I'll say a lot of people will go into these motors and be like, oh, I ported it
but they end up doing more harm than good, right? Because you're just getting there, you just think, I want to hog all this stuff out, I want to make everything bigger. At the end of the day, if you make everything bigger, you lose velocity. It's just like how fast water travels through something small, think pressure washer, right? Same theory. So I've seen guys take RC1, somebody we talked about earlier actually, took an RC1 race motor and put a 2-fast cylinder on it and cut literally like, these are your transfers. He cut them out as big as he could go. And so now you have all this air and fuel coming in, but it's not going fast. It's not coming in fast. So he just holds it open down the track. It's just like, bah, it never like has that whap, like winds up and goes, because it has to get that velocity, right? To get the speed and to get everything going. And it just, and I'm like, you literally destroyed a whole entire motor and a cylinder, like all high end, you know, $4,000 motor, and it's just like 10,000, 11,000 RPM all the way down the track, just like bog all the way down, when it should just come on and just like light up and just be on the pipe doing 14,000. It's just bogging because all was hogged out, and you just ruined the whole motor. So if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it.
No.
So we've got the studs in here. The rings are in place, C-clips are in. Not sure if the camera's gonna pick it up, but basically what you wanna do is find your little pin there. That's gonna locate where you want the ends to be. So in your bottom ring, it's right there. Your top one, it's right there. So you can always take like a Sharpie if you want, put a little mark on the top of the piston to know where those are. They're kind of hard to see. But then what I'll do is put a little bit of oil on here as well. And then I'll pinch the sides, because your cylinder has like the two recesses here, so I use this for my hands to pinch the sides of the piston, slide the cylinder over the top, and it should just drop right in. After that, you just put the whole thing back together. But I don't, since you have Honda Bond here on this base gasket, I don't put any on here because it's kind of irrelevant, right? Okay. I will say that probably, I think I've ever had a base gasket leak with Honda Bond. Typically it's like a port on an intake, like a little that vacuum nipple on an intake or something like that. But of course we'll pressurize it and make sure everything's good on this guy. So we'll take a little bit of magic oil here, and you can use like assembly lube or whatever. Like, you should always have 2-stroke oil, obviously, if you have a 2-stroke, but that's not super critical what type of oil you use here. And this just makes it to where when you kick it the first few times, you don't have that dry start, because you kick it and there's no oil or fuel in here, so you get that dry start with the rings. But if you lube it up like this, you don't have that dry start. Everything was good, blew it out with air. Should be golden. So now, next step is to kind of locate it where those are. I'll hold it like so. Sometimes this can be a little tricky, but like so. And then also, sometimes your skirt, see how your skirt is touching this gasket?
Yes.
You got to keep an eye on this. If you push it down, you push on that gasket. Sometimes if you have your skirt one way or another, or your gasket's a little bit loose there, it'll push it down like this, and it could cause it to rip or bend or kink. You see what I'm getting at, right? Because it overhangs a little bit. So a lot of the cheaper kits, they're not cut super great, or the holes here are loose, so it could be like rotated one way or the other. So when you put it down, it causes that base to kind of tweak one way or the other. But that's perfect. And when I talk about your squish, since we're here, it's when you lay a piece of solder from one side to the other, and it's the distance between, because obviously this is your O-ring, so this little flat surface here, it's this area here, right? So you lay a piece of solder from here, and you're gonna crank the motor, you're gonna go down and go all the way up and put it together, and you squish it. And then you take it and measure it. Got it. So that's why if you were, in theory, to raise this up higher, or you were to change the thickness of the gasket, right? Let's say you wanted to make your squish larger, meaning bigger. If you added gaskets, it's gonna raise this up, right? In theory, making the squish larger. So this is, anytime somebody's like a hyper race kit or an RC1 or something like that, courses you can just bolt on and go. There's no risk. With like the twin, whatever, you've got to check one, set it where you want it, then check the other, set it where you want it, make sure they're the same. Like that RC1, you have to check, make sure that's good, because if it's too tight, they allow them, you can stack base gaskets to choose how tight you want it. Because if you run really tight, you make more power, you can get pre-detonation, just like a car. When you're, like an old carbureted car, right? You get that pinging sound because you get that detonation. You get the same thing with a 2-stroke and you blow them up. This motor doesn't matter, but if you end up doing like some high-end build, then yeah, I definitely want to do that. But yeah, just roll it up and down and everything looks perfect like it should. The O-ring, what I do with this, not as big of a deal in horizontals. And this is one of these things that's not like, it's not critical, but it's kind of something I do. You can use 2-stroke oil or Honda Bond, and this is not to help it to seal, but this is to help it stay in the groove, to make it just a tiny bit sticky. Again, it's not to help it seal, but oftentimes because it's a vertical, right? You'll go to slide it on, that O-ring will drop out of its place and you'll smash it and then you don't get a seal. But what's cool about the Italian kits is you get an O-ring, it's never gonna leak. And plus, if you wanna pull your cylinder head off, 4 bolts, pop the head off, and the studs are nice too. And then you literally don't have to do anything. The seal's typically fine. So you can take a look in there, oh, looks good, put it back on, off you go. Versus the stamped metal one, you have to Honda bonnet, seal it. But a lot of the kits you get, the cheaper kits, they just give you stamped metal, which is obviously, I mean, this is gonna be a much better seal than the stamped metal, so. But I just do 2-stroke oil or Honda bond, but you don't need any Honda bond for sealing up here because the O-ring is gonna do that. But it helps it stay in its groove so it doesn't flop out on you. And horizontals, like I said, aren't as bad because you like this. Verticals, it definitely helps. Yeah, Polini changes their, they change their casting and they have like a little tiny burr here or there. Okay. So it had a BR7 HS in your old, we're gonna do an 8. It's a little bit colder. And then have you installed a temp gauge before?
No.
You always want to cut this ring off.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Just a lot of people.
I know that just because I have temp. I've never installed it, but all my bikes have it. So yeah.
A lot of people leave it on, and then they get leaks, right? Because they have this on top of the copper.
Yeah, no one even ever told me that, but I assume the first time that I put a plug in.
All these companies are selling stuff like, I don't even know how they can offer it. How do you, well, they don't. I mean, I guess they don't offer advice, but I'm like, if you don't work on these bikes every day, how are you able to offer for good product to your customers if you don't work on them? That's what always baffled me.
Customer support.
Yeah, yep.
Which I mean makes sense.
But it's not really fair to the customer because they're gonna get whatever stuff this person can push at the given moment. And they're just doing it because they're making money off of that person.
Right,
you know?
and they're getting what they want out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Also helps on the spark plug just to get a little bit of dab of oil on it, on the threads. Just when you go take it out the next time, it'll be a little bit easier. And some people kind of go back and forth. You can thread lock these, but what I tell people to do, you can pull it apart and re-snug them down in 150, 200 miles. Would you rather me thread lock them?
Oh, I'd thread lock on.
Okay.
You don't like thread lock on those? And why don't you like?
Well,
thread
so
lock?
I don't, because if for some reason the thread lock on this is stronger than the thread lock at the base of it, then when you undo it, you're going to pull the whole stud out. So if you go take your head off and a couple of your studs come out,
you can just torque them. I'm pretty good about retorquing stuff anyways.
The thing is, if you pull, let's say all your studs come out, you go to check something, now you got to pull the whole cylinder off, because if the studs came out, who's to say that you didn't lose that seal at the bottom? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'd rather know that these will come off than potentially pull all the studs out that have to reseal the base. That's just me. And it's really not that hard, it's really not that hard to check them. And they, Honda specs 10 foot-pounds, I do them by hand. Because I have seen things break around 10 to 12. I feel like I have a good feeling mechanically with my hands, that I just do them by hand, and I've never broken a stud, never had a problem. Okay, so feel that.
I was actually gonna ask to do that, because that's how
that's about where I do them. I would rather be.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yep, I like it.
Okay. And again,
I feel like I got to torque from where I was, and I was just trying to get where your feel was.
And this is where your temp gauge is gonna go. A lot of times I do this now, because when you're trying to fish the ring in there, a lot of times you'll either cross thread it or you know, you've been there. You fought with that before.
Roadside spark plug, frickin', I know that.
You're like, yep, been there, done that. So I do this before I work the temp ring all the way to the top of the plug, and then once you do that, you can just spin the plug without the temp ring spinning. Because a lot of times you'll do it and it'll stick, and you're just like trying to spin it while you're forcing that temp ring. You mess up the temp ring, and then you get an air leak. That's
I go all the way to the top of my thing when I put a new plug in, even when I'm on the roadside.
Sometimes some heads you'll have to like kind of ground a little bit of area to clearance it one way, but the Corsa or the Contessa works out really good. That's it for that guy. So that's your cylinder. Next we'll do the intake manifold. This we may use, but the Polini has like a basically groove on the cylinder. Not all of them have that, but see, you can do this if you want. But that puts a lot of stress because your metal is gonna be flat, right? It's gonna be flat like this. So when you pinch here and pinch here, you can oftentimes you can bow this. You can bow that flange. So I like the flats myself because it's equal stress all the way around, right? So guys with like the Scorpion pipes and the Philippine pipes and whatever, they always bend because they're just like super thin. It's like they recycle cans and they make pipes out of them. I'm serious. I'm sure you've seen them before. They're really bad. But
I've seen some of like the guys sitting around like a fucking thing, like handing pieces of metal to each other. Yeah, bad.
Yeah, they don't have like shoes on or anything.
It looks like Coke cans.
No offense to anybody who doesn't wear shoes at their work, but so you kind of have to pull this whole intake apart to put this all together. You see his logo on the Snap-on? You see the Bellini sticker. He kept using my toolbox. I'm like, Paul, do you get your own toolbox, dude?
Is that like not Snap-on brand and stuff like?
No, it's a Bellini sticker. It's a Harbor Freight, but I don't know where he like cut it on the pieces. Yeah. It's like it's U.S. General. See mine? It says U.S. General, but then he cut them all up and he made his.
Snap-on. That's hilarious.
We have a video where we have this big arrow box. I don't know if you watch our YouTube stuff, but we have a big.
I do, yeah.
Video we have a big arrow box, big box. I'm over here and I hear Pat. He's like, "Hey, Paul, come over here." Paul walks around the corner. He comes around here and I hear Paul go, "God, fuck!" I hear him yell because Pat hid in the box. And it's like this 4 foot by 4 foot box. And Pat's got a video. And he jumps down, scares him. Paul's like, "Fuck!" He starts throwing things at Pat because it scared him. He gets right when he first came to work here. It was like every day he came here, I hid behind the door, jumped out at him, and he's like, "Paul," and because he's always on edge, and he would just jump out of his skin every time.
Let's see if I can scare him.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, those typically aren't too tight, but I mean, I turn this in by hand, so you're not going to damage anything. This stuff's all pretty straightforward. I'm sure this is easy peasy for you.
Oh yeah, nothing's easy peasy for me.
And if check these at some point, snug up your spark plug, just go in and just pop your shrouds off and maybe just double check everything. It's one of those things where things do come loose. I would rather have you have to go back in 100 miles and check it than risk Loctiting something and stripping something or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just kind of how. Impact for any of this crap. So
once again, we don't do anything with this. We just leave that plug just like that.
Yep. Yeah, see, you gotta trim a little bit. Let's see here, that may clear. Always forget, some you have to trim more than others. It's not really super critical to trim it, but this has to come off. So I just drill these little rivets out and pop this guy off. Ooh, Paul, it's like a fine one. Nice. Does it? Here, put it back down there. Look at this. Like, Look at stuff right here.
What does it taste like?
Oh,
You want to taste it? Look at this. What is this? It's like, it looks like caramel.
I'm drinking it for free.
You're not drinking it for free? I wouldn't pay to drink it because this would, that's like caramel. I think this is did somebody fill this with a mocha? Is that what that is?
it looks like a fucking.
Oh, don't. No, Paul, it's bad for you. It is. It's like a caramel. This is a caramel macchiato, dude. Oh, wow.
Bidding starts at $40.
$40? No, no, no. Paul, this would make you really sick. This is gross. It's like caramel macchiato right here. Wow. So see back here where this belt is sitting?
Yes.
I'm gonna throw some shims in there to get it up a little bit higher because that's gonna kill your bottom end. It would run just fine like that. It's just you're gonna lose a lot of bottom
The higher
end.
it is back here,
Yeah.
the higher that's how you get when it goes down, right?
The shim in the front isn't gonna help your top end. It's gonna help your bottom end. 'Cause
Oh, okay, okay.
it's gonna help your bottom end. So you saw where it's sitting now.
Yes.
And then you'll see, ooh, those are thick. I'm gonna try 3.
How many did you put in there?
3.
3.
You know, I don't know, we'll see. Maybe we got lucky, maybe that pump's not gonna overfill it. Maybe there's a little tiny chunk of sediment or something that was in that jet or for the float. Maybe that's why it was overflowing. Maybe. We'll see. Because it didn't do it there. It should pretty much do it all the time. So idle's when you have the most amount of vacuum too. So idle's when you would notice that the most. I'll fire it up and then you can see how much higher that belt's gonna ride in the back. They are thick. Let's do one thick one.
So that again is what you told me to remember, right? To compress that when you're putting the belt on?
Always, yeah.
Got it.
And sometimes this is easy because it's a really soft contour, but you can see I'm up against the boss versus up against the belt. You see those aluminum ZX spacers we sell that fit here? It's spaces that cover out. So when you do add lots of shims, you can move the cover out with it.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's
you have to be able to for those things. I got it.
That's an option too, but typically don't have to unless you do a ZX pulley. So not sure why yours is riding a little bit lower than typical, but let's give that a shot. Higher, could come up a little higher, but it'd be nice if it was a little bit higher, but it's not terrible. I'll probably see how it runs.
Pulling up on it, man.
I know.
It's like a lowrider.